All right, here's a second try. My first video froze, so I never know how to think about that. But it's December 27th, 2018. We're here in Command Central, the office room, the broom closet. John Zander, good to see you. And this morning I'm just going to continue with some of these Tiny Desk broadcasts. I want to, the yesterday's went up on YouTube, on the Fickleboards YouTube channel, and I'm looking for platforming for my talk casts. Folks are recommending that I use, all the streaming platforms and things like that. It's not that I'm completely ignorant of the technologies that exist. I know sometimes I come off like I'm a bit of a Luddite. The thing is that I've been watching, and there's been a lot of deplatforming and things that go on, demonetization and deplatforming, and I'm uncomfortable with investing my content into a platform that I'm not sure is going to be here for a while. Good to see you guys here. Thanks for joining what has now been in the comments called the Lewcast. I like casting from the workshop. I'll continue doing that too. They'll also go on the YouTube channel. And getting the talk version of this onto iTunes is really troubling. It takes like an hour to upload, and it's a little bit labor intensive to put it on iTunes. It's a lot easier for me to live cast on Facebook. I have this interaction with you guys. A lot of people who follow me on Facebook are ready to join the conversation, throw up a comment, maybe help guide me into a topic that you guys are interested in. I am sort of the living version of the Reddit Ask Me Anything. We have so much in skateboarding that just doesn't get discussed. I was on the phone with a friend today, had a great phone call, longtime friend and industry guy, and iTunes is also problematic because until your podcast is like pretty heavily followed, you can't even search for the Fickleboards podcast. It doesn't even come up. If you search for it specifically, it won't come up. You have to go on the Fickleboards website, and let me actually do that. I've got my dinosaur here. This is a 2006 MacBook Pro. To say that this thing is slow, I guess the amount of information per web page nowadays is so high. Good morning, Thaddeus McBoy, videographer extraordinaire. Good to have you here with me. Had a really enjoyable conversation with Steve O'Collins last night, and really fun stuff. But going on to fickleboards.com, fickleskateboards.com, they both work. It's taken a while. It's kicked over. Going on my site here, we'll load these up into iTunes. But I was talking with David yesterday, and I was uncomfortable to know that it really takes, time to load the content there. I wish there were a way, just like I can stream directly to Facebook, save the video, and then post it to YouTube. It takes me about 10 minutes. Boy, our site is gorgeous. So I click on, I guess, blog. I'm clicking on blog here. Again, everything takes about 10 minutes. And I've got a bunch of topics on here, and I'm not even seeing our podcast on here right now. I do see an article I wrote a while ago that says, if skateboarding isn't for everybody, it isn't for anybody. Part 1. It never got a... I have coffee. This is coffee. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, though. Now, I will cop to sleeping until... I slept until... probably slept until And then 8:30 this morning. Really enjoyed the sleep. Really did. So I'm not seeing our podcast on here for iTunes, and for Stitcher and for Podomatic or whatever client you're using or app you're using for podcasts. But I do want to talk with you guys, and I want to talk about a bunch of things that never get talked about. An example of it is you got the 9 Club, and the 9 Club. You just had a dealio with Ryan Gallant. He just did a 9 Club, and they asked him about his first sponsor. Well, I know who Ryan Gallant's first sponsor was, and it's a very interesting story about a very, very cool small company over there in the Northeast, and that's not the story that got told. If they had told the story of Ryan Gallant's first sponsor, they would have told the story of some really, really cool skateboarding history that's been overlooked, lost to the feed, but they didn't. They didn't tell that story. Instead, they picked another first sponsor, which is fine. I mean, I think it's even possible that, in all honesty, the memory just didn't hold. I don't mean to be mean about it or anything, but I was itching. When I clicked on the 9 Club to listen to Ryan Gallant, I wanted to hear about the Cleveland Superboard Factory skateboard brand. I wanted to hear the stories about the beautiful hand-screened skateboards that Cleveland used to produce way back in the day under their incredible owner, who is a friend of mine today. I just spilled coffee on myself. Not very much, though. And let's be honest, it just joins the patina of stains that are this American Nomad sweatshirt that I wear all the time. It is a gift that Bill Danforth gave me this on a day when he and I were discussing cease and desists and industry, not drama. I don't think drama is the right word for it. We were discussing industry ethos. We were discussing the ethos of the skateboarding industry and how there are so many tactics and really gnarly things that happen in the industry. John Zanders writes, I sewed those with Bill on my aunt's sewing machine. And this hoodie is, it has, to say it's seen better days is an understatement. Both of the sleeves are, I'm loving your comments, guys. But I want to do, I can't do much from this office here. I can ask questions, I can I can opine on things, I can ask questions, and one of the questions that's been on my mind forefront is about Jules Lynn. Julie Lynn Kinstrin Nelson on Facebook. Go follow her on Facebook. She's one of us down here, and I was following her closely when she was just a lass. She's 25 or so now, and this year she reached an age where there were some things that she says that she couldn't sit on any longer. She had to talk about, and she couldn't, in good conscience, sit on. And she brought forth 6 pages of authentically written, some of it in rant form, some of it in almost a poetic style of prose, and some of it just straight up easy to debunk timeline of allegations. And these allegations were, of course, of juvenile sexual abuse. She was abused by a man in her 30s. She alleges being abused by a man in her 30s, a man in the industry of great power. And she also alleged that these things went on and were under the purview of folks in the industry. She named names. She went completely ham on this issue, which I think is terrific. What struck me was that since that, Now, the DA in her county or her state, California, declined to investigate. She posted the correspondence from the DA. She posted all this stuff, and it's a fascinating and possibly very important. It is very important. This whole thing is extremely important for all of us to talk about. Now, nobody is talking about it, and they're certainly not going to have her on the 9 Club, and they're certainly not going to give any time or attention to this. Thrasher did nothing. Jenkum did an article that I could only call a cursory glance at what's going on. And I have a question. When I was accused, when I was defamed, you guys know I press a very small brand of skateboards. I have an axe to grind. I have a bias. My axe to grind and my bias focus around what makes more skateboarders, what makes more of every kind of skateboarder. You're going to find me being contentious about open culture versus closed culture. You're going to find me exhibiting critique and sometimes relatively low level of disapproval and anger about these things because the things that reduce the number of skateboarding are, in my bias, they are wrong. They're bad. If you run a skate shop, if you run a skate magazine, if you run a skateboarding industry entity of any kind, a brand, then you need to be held to a standard that is you need to be held to the standard that you're increasing the number of skateboarders, the number of kinds of skateboarders, blah, blah, blah. So you guys are going to find me. I get twitchy about that stuff. And I think you can find I have a very consistent compass north that when public skateboarding entities like brands, like shops, like publications, when they drop the ball on providing accountability, providing the service of increasing the number of skaters in the world, then you watch me. I get twitchy about it. You can depend on me for that. I'm dependable. I'm also accountable. I don't just critique and I don't just talk about things. In fact, I've held back for years from talking about things, and instead I've put a lot of energy into creating an alternative. It's only one small way to create an alternative to press decks. I'm certainly not the first, the only, or the best at pressing decks. But pressing decks and creating a brand, Fickle Skateboards, that's all about the inclusion of every kind and type of person in skateboarding. That's my passion project. And I love my work. I love making skateboards. It comes from a place deep in my heart, rooted in... I took off only 4 to 5 years in the 90s. I married Judy in 92, and in the summer of 92, I put my board in a garage sale, and I said, I'm going to focus on learning about life and God and family. Had my first son at 21 years old. He was born in 94, and in 96, when he was 2 years old, I started to play skateboards with him again. And before that, in the late 80s, I was a good skateboarder. I was crazy and losing my mind for 6 other different reasons, and channeled it into my skateboarding at times fairly well. But I always have brought to skateboarding my opinion that we should question authority. Especially retail and business corporations. We should question them. We should hold them accountable to the questions that we ought to be asking them. And in skateboarding, I find that we are not questioning our corporate overlords. They are Thrasher Magazine. They are the large conglomerate, weird, murky soup of distros and brands and like that. And oh yeah, big pants and tiny wheels. I was a hard no. When wheels shrank down, I remember I watched a guy doing blunts on a curb. He was going up to a curb. It was just a parking block size curb, and he was going to ollie to blunt to backside pivot and out, blunt to frontside pivot and out. I watched him for hours and hours on a tiny wheeled board. I was in college and still skating at the time. And I watched him. He was outside my window, and I was typing up a term paper or something like that. I studied French. Just get in, get out. I don't like... I could study something now. I'd do fine, but I did not like studies very much. And I just looked out the window and I thought, that was when blunts became like the trick to do, and I thought, I will never learn blunts because of this. I just can't deal with not going fast on my board, not flowing, not turning, not carving, and it's been a prison of great luxury to have no drive to become a trick machine, no drive to score points in that silent competition of the soul. And my take on it is, my personal take is that conformity plays way too great a role in the skateboarding that we are seeing today. It is like if we were in a fishbowl and we were little goldfish, it's like there's just poop in the water, just so much poop, and it's making everyone sick, and any fish that has a choice wouldn't want to swim in those waters. And that's why the kids are riding scooters. They get to play, they get to roll, they get to go fast, they get to have a good time, and they don't have to learn the kickflip. Look at the YouTuber skaters, and you can see that they don't have a concept of skateboarding that doesn't start with the kickflip. They don't have a concept of beginning riding without the kickflip. It's so pervasive that you almost don't notice it anymore. But I never went in for that, and ironically, some people who skate with me think I'm a good skateboarder. But it's not the case. What I am is a man having fun, going fast on a board, and I'm really enjoying myself when I skate. And so because of that, you just don't see folks go to the park and just rip around and have fun, carve front side, back side, carve and have fun. I did wear big pants. I actually, in the later 90s, I couldn't afford a pair of Jinko jeans, but I did have a pair of bullheads that I wore, like, to death. And then I also did my poor man's Jinko, which was to get a size 42 overall and a big smock shirt over the top of it with no shirt, overalls, then big smock shirt, and that just was perfect. It was like being naked. I loved that. And I wore a brand of shoes back then. Can't remember what they were called, but they had big rubber all around the outside, orange suede. Anyone know what those were? I stood out because they were sort of clown shoey. They had all this rubber around them, but boy, were they great for skateboarding. That was when the vulcanized shoes began to hit, when the Chinese production and profit margins began to dictate that we wear the thinnest, least protective possible shoe, and like that. Now the Dunks and the padded shoes are coming up. A lot of New Balance happening. But 90s brands really didn't fulfill me because I was raised in skateboarding on the Dead Kennedys and that intense critique of mainstream conformity, and I maintain that today. Which is why I get rankled when I listen to Anthony Shetler's podcast or when I listen to the Nine Club. I don't enjoy them because it's a bunch of softball questions being asked by a bunch of pros to a bunch of pros. It's all era appropriate. There's not a lot. I mean, you get someone like Jeff Grosso. He's done a couple recent interviews. I mean, they cut down his Nine Club interview. They didn't want him to get fired, but Grosso is. He did an unedited interview, evidently unedited. I don't think it was completely unedited, but he did an hour-long interview with a Brazilian outfit that came out last week. You know what's funny about board feel and thin shoes? Let's talk about it. I have a pair of shoes here. These are shoes I'm wearing right now, and I've got no problem at all with these shoes. I like a couple things. These do not have Lunar Lawn. These have a cheap insole. This is not Lunar Lawn. This is not the good insole. I paid $90 for these at a skate shop in Oklahoma. Nice enough fellas. These I had to buy these because my Vans had been stolen at a McDonald's off my motorcycle in Oklahoma City, a rite of passage for motorcycle skateboard travel. And so I went to buy. I spent $75 on my Vans, and they were terrible, absolutely terrible. Oh my gosh! I was getting blisters on the bottom of my feet because they stretched out in just 6 skateboard sessions. They stretched out so much that you couldn't get them tight. And they were the correct size. My foot is a strong 9.5. So I went and I got a pair of these. They're blue, but they're almost black. I like black shoes with a white rand. You know, I do like fashion. I don't mind Nike. I don't think Nike is skateboarding. I think that Nike is a shoe company that makes a good enough shoe to ride. I've got these. I've got a pair of Vans in the car. I picked them up for $35. That's the right price for a pair of Vans. And these are not bad shoes because the glue holds. When the glue pops, like on Converse, the glue tends to pop around the rand. You can repair it, but the glue holds on these, and that's good enough. But what I really loved skating in were the Nike Air Force One style shoe, much thicker. Boards were bigger, and board feel was not something we worried about. I skated in a lot of Chuck Taylors. They were small, they were thin, they hurt my feet. And I did enjoy the Airwalk prototype. It was a shoe that I liked my first pair, and then my second 2 pairs, I didn't even wear them till they wore out. They were kind of junky. Whereas a Converse basketball shoe gave you that ankle support. I really needed ankle support because I blew out the ligaments on the outside of my front ankle, and in these later years of my life, it is as if the ligaments have reattached. I now can flick my board better than I have been able to in 25 years. I'm 33 years in on skateboarding. I have no plans to increase my number of tricks. I have no plans to become a better skateboarder. My plan every day that I bring my skateboard out is to enjoy the feeling of movement and flying and little tiny reduced weight and weightless moments. That's everything to me. And I think that if that's where, and I do tricks. I mean, I got accused of doing tricks the other day, and I do learn new tricks, but those are incidental qualities of my skateboarding. This is where I'm coming from, and you need to know it because you're going to hear me talk about stuff, and you say, well, Lou, I thought, isn't trick progression really important? It's not. What's really important is fun. And fun is really tricky. It's a slippery fish because for some people, what they're thinking is fun is actually they're feeling safe in their conformity. For some people, what they're thinking is fun riding a skateboard is that they're getting incorporated into a group identity, and they're finally feeling a sense of identity. And these are deeper issues than most people prefer to plumb. Most people don't feel like thinking through all of this philosophical stuff when they're just out riding their skateboard. In fact, most of the time it doesn't matter until you have our media producing articles through the 90s, early 2000s, late 2010. You've got them producing articles that marginalize people and call them kooks. I think kook is a very dirty word, and it's also a fun word to spoof. Calling people kooks just because they don't skateboard the way that. Oh, that's a deep crime against the heart and spirit of what skateboarding has to offer. And you need to know another thing about me is I constantly have an ocean of people in my head. These people don't skateboard yet. I'm constantly thinking about all these people who don't skateboard yet, and I'm constantly thinking, is what we're doing in the skateboarding industry going to increase or decrease the likelihood that a person will get to enjoy riding a skateboard? Is what we're doing in our industry going to promote insider, closed-set culture, or is it going to, or is it, I'm going to do it this way. I got a whiteboard. We've done this moment before. I'm going to do it again. All right. So here's skateboarding, right? This is playing with skateboards, right? And here is the circle of people who, when they play with the skateboards, they rip. Oh, I see. I'm going to actually fix this since there's not a lot of orthography involved. I'm going to make that S so you guys can read it. There we go. Skateboarding. And this circle is the people who are like Nija, and there are very few people in this circle. This is the circle of people who are absolutely gifted, wonderful, amazing examples of being a skateboarder. And then there's this circle out here, and this is devoted, dedicated, and you can draw these circles on there. This is devoted and dedicated skateboarders who are aspiring to or have put in the time and the work and the blood and the sweat. These are the people who've made their bones in their local scene. Maybe they've been AM for companies and had a toehold in the industry, on and on. This is an amazing group of people. And then out here are the people who play skateboards. I think of several of my friends who actually I admire very much out here in this area. I'm going to take off this battery warning here really quick so I can see what's going on the screen. Okay. And out here in this outer circle are people who are they're good time folks who just enjoy skateboarding for what it is, and they use skateboards for fun. Maybe they collect them. Maybe they got too old, too fat. Maybe they got hurt or they got sick, and they really are not going to achieve great feats on their skateboard. And so in my view, what I have in my view is simply this here is gone, and this here is gone. So now these guys are mad because the thing that separates them from the kooks on the outside is gone, and now that we've made one family out of them, these guys that just lost their circle are mad. And then it's dry erase, it comes right off. And then right here, when you take this off and you say, well, you know what, the guys at the welfare line and Never Was are just as important to skateboarding as Nigel Houston and the great pros. I think a lot of those guys would agree that that's true, that skateboarding is truly for everyone, and that if you like skateboards, if you like skateboarding, you are in. You're important, and your perspective is important. And what's funny is out here in the furthest out level of skill and sacrifice, you've got people who are extremely enthusiastic about collecting skateboards, and they do buy it. They buy a ton of stuff, and that's great. That's great for the business people among us. I am a business person, and I love the product I make is largely for riding. We do a couple of collector style things, and I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with it because I like making boards for being ridden. But this here, who could be against that? Who could be against that? Well, it turns out there are quite a few people who have a lot to lose if we start promoting skateboarding for enjoyment. You can see these people get all worked up when someone wears the Thrasher hoodie. You know, the classic drama over wearing Thrasher. Let's take a palette cleanser and look at a knife. I'm feeling a little jammed up here, so let's get out the knife box and let's do a palette cleanser today. That's a sharpener, and this is not a knife. This one is one of my favorites, but and that doesn't have a knife in it. But you know what? I want to pull off. I've wanted to do this one for a while, like since yesterday. Let's do this one over here. my wife and I went to the Philippines. She grew up there. And we stayed at a house, and this is made from a truck leaf spring. And I'm not carrying a knife right now. I'm at my home. I have knives everywhere, so I don't have to carry one in my pocket right now. But they sell these in the market. This is a water buffalo horn that they or hoof. I think it's horn. Might be hoof. But they form the water buffalo to the leaf spring, and look at the tang doesn't go all the way to the end. This is a kitchen knife there, and it's a full it's 3/8 of an inch thick steel. And look at this back edge. This is not a bolo. The bolo is their traditional knife. I would have bought a bolo, but I watched where I live. This was in the kitchen, just like this, rusty, and it was oiled, and it was clean. But this thing is used on a coconut. They use the back side of it as a hatchet and smasher. You use the front side of it to cut off the husk. And I love this knife. This is a really cool knife. And it's a tool. It's a daily use tool in the Philippines, right in their kitchen. And what's interesting in the Philippines where I was staying, I was out in the countryside, is that their kitchens are open air. Under a long patio when it's blowing rain or something like that, which it does there, you're relatively shaded. But the kitchen was a relatively open patio setup, and it was delightful. And I love this knife. This is a really cool knife. It's heavy. Again, that's a piece of leaf spring, and it's 18 inches long. I mean, that's a nice big long knife. Probably 15 inches. This one here, and it's leaf spring, so it's hard steel. It's a good one, and so that one is today's knife break. That felt good. I was talking a lot of deep skate stuff, and it's nice to take a little break from it. I think when I'm in my 60s, I'll make knives. I want to make myself a Bowie knife out of a leaf spring, and make a really cool carrying knife. I think I'll move to New Mexico one day and live up there. And Scott Ranson. Knives got us out of the caves. They sure did. I love knives. I love what they represent in terms of... I love pipes and knives, and I love things that are carried in the hand and used as tools. I'm a fiddler with stuff like that. And so I also love Bibles. I love the binding, the quality sewn binding on Bibles and things like that. I'm a bit of a nerd that way. But hey, today we had a good talk. We began to chat about some things, and what I wanted to return to about Jules Lynn, it's been bothering me, is look, when I was defamed by a skateboard industry guy, some of you know the story. It's quite a story, and it's a matter of public record in the courts. It's not something that's a he said, she said. The narrative of that story is actually established in over 2 years of court record. It was a crime of assault and a crime of defamation. It is an ongoing business harassment issue that exists, and it's bad for everyone. It's bad for our set here. Calling people kooks and threatening to murder people who embarrass you by creating an alternative in quality and authenticity is bad for everyone, and that's why I've stood up against those ethics among us. But in regard to Jules Lynn, where is the cease and desist? Why hasn't Jules Lynn been served with legal papers that why has there been no legal response to silence Jules Lynn? I have a theory. Here's the problem with issuing a cease and desist. Let's say I come out with an allegation. Let's take my allegation. I have an allegation. I was publicly assaulted numerous times over a period of 2 years by a skateboard industry well-known godfather of 90th Street. Okay. And I say so openly because saying so openly brings accountability and lowers the likelihood that that kind of behavior will continue. It's good for all of us, so that's what I'm doing. All right, so let's say they're tired of me saying so and they want to shut me up. So they send me a cease and desist order. Well, actually, they'll end up paying court costs and possibly getting countersued because the truth is established and easily verified that that's what happened. So you can't cease and desist someone who's telling the truth. It has to be false. It has to be not true. And if you decide to send a cease and desist hoping to intimidate someone, but they have a well-established timeline of public behavior and easily corroborated facts, they can decline to acquiesce to your cease and desist and actually enter into a courtroom session of accountability on the claims. This is why when someone alleges sexual harassment, and it's true, oftentimes the person against whom the allegations are laid will decline to resist those allegations. They'll just go dark and wait for it to pass over and hope that everyone will slut shame the person who's bringing the allegations, and hope that the slut shaming will be enough for that person to go away and finally blow up. Or they'll resort to more subtle intimidation tactics, marginalizing them within industry and community, on and on and on. They may start to lay veiled references to a false narrative or something like that. They may try to reinvent the story in a different way, but they're going to be very, very careful not to cause an accountability before the courts, because the courts are going to want to know what actually happened. And in the case of sexual misconduct, sexual crimes, in the case of assault, if the courts find out that you committed a crime and that you attempted to cover it up with a cease and desist against the allegations, you're facing some serious legal trouble. It's a very big problem. And in regard to this Julie Lynn, Kinstrin Nelson, Jules Lynn set of allegations, I think it is noteworthy that to date there have not been any cease and desist orders or any sort of legal response or PR response beyond the involvement of the Olympic Safe Sport community group, Watchdog, and like that. And I think that the absence of those things is very significant at this point. It's been some time. There should be some response. There is none, and all of the classic tactic of shaming and bringing up everything wrong. You know, when a person is abused in the way that these allegations assert, they tend to go off and get addicted to drugs. They're usually a vulnerable and troubled person to start, and that certainly is the case in terms of the narrative emerging from the Jules Lynn issue. And the problem with a person who is vulnerable and suffers abuse and then goes on to medicating with drugs and often becoming, a lot of issues like this return to the scene of the crime is a heavy aspect where they will often go off. In Julie's case, she was involved in adult entertainment for a while and things like that. All of this becomes fodder for the people who want to discredit and smear, and it really is absolutely an arduous and perilous journey for a person to come forward with allegations. Why would a person come forward? Well, one of the things that's part of Julie's narrative and her allegations is that aging into 25 years old, she realized that burying all this stuff behind her, all of this alleged behavior behind her, burying it was the natural thing to do and just try to move on with her life. And she's been clean from drugs for over 6 years now, and she's really pulled her life together. But as she achieved greater and greater degrees of personal maturity and mental clarity, her conscience was piqued by the fact that she was not doing anything to make it harder for this sort of thing to go on. And so she brought her 6 pages of allegations and began her Boy, Sam Cooke is speaking some truth on here. Addiction is a side effect of self-medicating. The way I see this, having walked with addicts, having walked with victims of sexual abuse in my life, having been part of recovery for these people, I'm background checked by the government every year. I am certified to work with children. I am cleared. That's one reason why when the industry mainstream guy, Deluxe Affiliated, came and accused me or defamed me with the epithet of being a child molester, it was so angering to me, because I've worked with youth and young adults in recovery from that sort of thing for a long time, and I have strong feelings about those issues, and I've put life and skin and blood in the game, blood in the sands of the arenas, in helping people walk recovery from that. And to have a business competitor simply mad because I make good boards, non-factory quality good boards, and say so, and say that my company, my brand, is superior on some merits than the mainstream brand, oh man, go sit on a tack, dude. It was, and we do come around to this again and again, because this is what when someone comes out with something really serious, you make a brand and you got brand rivalries and there's some business harassment, that's one thing. But when a person comes forward with serious allegations, highly structured, and in that narrative there's the authenticity of that medicating behavior, that evidence of a really broken person that speaks to the contours of a real survivor of abuse, and then you've got this stark absence of any cease and desist, any legal response to these earth-shaking allegations that really do threaten. They threaten the status quo. These allegations reach the very highest levels of the U.S. Olympic skateboarding aspirations. I would rather wait on the Olympics and make sure that we don't have a repeat of the gymnastics team. Do you guys know what happened in the gymnastics team? And does anyone know anything else that's going on? Because our Olympic teams have not been easy on our athletes. And skateboarding is poised to set up for a huge scandal unless we achieve the kind of accountability and transparency that is necessary to ensure the safety of our athletes. And I'm not down for this sort of thing. We had a huge scandal that did not break here in Cincinnati. We had a major high-profile filmer. He's doing prison time right now, and anybody that tries to discuss it in the Cincinnati community has been menaced that they'll be marginalized and iced out and 86'd, because I think people don't want that touching the shop, the DIY, this, that, the other thing. And we watched as they said, someone said, we need to have a conversation about this to make sure this kind of thing is addressed and that we don't have a repeat of this kind of abuse. We had a huge issue happen here, and it got, and the official line was, no, nobody better talk about it at all. Anybody talks about it, you're in trouble. And nobody talked about it. There was no mechanism of community healing. There was no mechanism to address what happened and to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. And that is bad family management, man. If skateboarding wants to be a family and welcome everybody and be all this good feeling, then we have to do what families have to do. A lot of families won't do it. They won't talk about what happened. They won't talk about those bad things. I get it. I think it's a very, I have a fairly high degree of respect for the discomfort and the pain of dealing with these things. And now the Jules Lynn allegations are they're sort of washing back, and our media is not going to cover them. They're not going to dig in. And Jenkum did one article and said, "Well, this could be something," and I think that article largely inoculated people to it. And nobody really cares about what actually happened. The story can kind of go two ways. There's more than two ways, but it kind of go two ways. One is Jules has put out a timeline and an allegation that is highly detailed. She's put it out a great personal vulnerability, and it could come out that she is a pathological liar and a crazy person, and she could be destroyed. Or it could come out that her allegations are true, or partly true, or mostly true, or all true, and we could create accountability and transparency, and we could avoid the perpetuation of this kind of scandalous, evil, damaging, horrible stuff. But instead, it is evident to me that we have chosen the toxic middle. We have chosen to decide not to decide. We have chosen that we will not investigate or as a community ask the questions that are necessary. We will settle for no answer at all. And we will ever wonder whether Woodward and the Olympics and the X Games and the judges and the this and the that, we'll just wonder about it, and we'll be proud of ourselves, and we'll say, oh, I don't do drama. I don't do politics. I don't do drama. And that does nothing to make sure that our Olympic athletes are safe. After what happened in Olympic gymnastics for so many years, 10 years or more, this guy was doing this, a doctor on the team. There is no media mechanism that is bulldogging interested in making sure skateboarding and U.S. Olympic skateboarding is safe. And I think that one of the reasons why might be because it's not safe, and if we find out it's not safe, we might lose our Olympics or suffer a scandal. But it's better to lose the Olympics and suffer a scandal than it is to avoid transparency, because we're talking about whether or not kids, young kids, mostly girls, but some boys, maybe not, maybe boys too, whether they're going to be vulnerable to abuse. And I don't see the skateboarding media as having much teeth. And this is a thing where teeth should come into play. This should be toothful. So that's today's morning cast. This was a Facebook Live. It's going to go up on YouTube, and it might get imported to the podcast. I'm dissatisfied with the podcast format. I'm trying to figure out what the best way to get the audio up is, but today we looked at the Filipino Espada knife, nice palate cleanser. I really like this knife. I bought this one in a market in the Philippines. It wasn't in Baguio. I forget what city it was in. There was a tobacco festival there when we pulled in, and we were honored guests at the tobacco festival. It was really fun. It was a fun trip to the Philippines. I spent 10 days there. It was 2007, and I was suffering from the whooping cough. I caught pertussis, the whooping cough, that year. It was still a great year. I had a great year that year. I care. And I'm not, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I care. I care about you. And once again, we will be talking about this model, skateboarding without boundaries, without divisions. If you like skateboarding, you are in the group. If you like it, you may not do it. You may just like it. You are part of the group. The group is changing. Skateboarding is for everyone, not just for people who, boy, oh boy. Well, we're going to talk more about that next time. For now, this is Lou signing off, and you spend a lot of time talking, and your accountability goes way up. I don't envy me today because I yacked it up. As always, hi Mom, I love you, and I'll see you guys later.